In the last video, I talked about the big four methods of apologetics. Today, I want to talk more about presuppositional apologetics. Presuppositional apologetics poses Christianity as the only rational, consistent, and livable worldview, whereas all other worldviews not beginning with a biblical God are irrational, contradictory, or unlivable. It accomplishes this by getting to the presuppositions that unbelievers have. But what are presuppositions? Well, they are the intellectual starting points of a belief system or the assumptions a person has in his or her worldview. They would be like the little roots of a tree. The reality is everyone has presuppositions, both Christian and non-Christian alike. What presuppositional apologetics does is draw them out and ask, are they consistent with the God of the Bible? But what are some of the presuppositions that Christians have? Well, I created this little acronym that helps give this in a very oversimplified way. There's a lot more to them, and if you want to learn more, I recommend this book by K. Scott Oliphint. For now, we'll use the acronym TRACS. T stands for Triune God. As Christians, we are beginning with the Triune God who reveals himself, creates, and redeems. Our apologetics stands on a distinctly Christian understanding of God rather than just a general theism. We don't have to articulate that in every conversation that we have, but this should be in our minds as we converse with not yet believers. R is for a relationship by covenant. Mankind, both male and female, are made in the image of God. This fact has several implications. For one, all of humanity is in a covenant with God. This covenant, by the way, also has authority because it's the triune God who made it. Also, because mankind is made in God's image, all people know God to some extent. And God has placed that knowledge in each person both internally and externally. But despite this covenant and knowledge, people refuse to acknowledge that, which leads to A for antithesis and suppression. There is an antithesis between Christian theism and any other opposing position. Any other worldview contrary to Christianity represses the truth and leaves people in a relationship of wrath with God. Biblically speaking, this is what it means to be in Adam. The suppression is not absolute, however. It's like when you try to put a beach ball in the water and it just bounces back up again. In the same way, even when an unbeliever tries to suppress the knowledge of God, that knowledge still pops up from time to time. This is what enables the next presupposition, which is C, conversion and persuasion. Based on the reality of suppression, you might ask, how is it possible for anyone to believe if they suppress the truth? The knowledge of God, which people have from God placing it in them, plus God's mercy, which holds back their suppression, allows for persuasion. In other words, God's revelation and work of the Holy Spirit bring change in someone. K stands for knowledge by God. Every fact, whether related to math, science, or, everything in the world, is properly seen only in the context of its God-given purpose. Since God is the creator of everything in the world, it makes sense that he gives everything in the world its intended purpose. If you remove God, those purposes become distorted. And lastly, S stands for strongholds and salvation. When we're in a conversation with an unbeliever, we're dealing with what Paul calls strongholds. These can range from intellectual to emotional to other strongholds or types of authority in that unbeliever's life. The key is to bring these down, not with a physical war, but by a spiritual one. When the weakness of that stronghold is found, the Christian is able to destroy it. But we don't just leave it there. While we do tear down the stronghold of the unbeliever's worldview, we also present the Christian worldview in all of its truth, goodness, and beauty. So how do we do this? Well, the strategy in presuppositionalism is twofold. The first is getting to the unbeliever's presuppositions by asking questions. The questions that we can ask can vary, but here's a few general ones that could be a good starting point. The second is getting them to Jesus. Whether you use the presuppositional method or not, this is the most important piece of apologetics, getting to proclaim Christ. Part of that could be going through the story of the Bible from creation to fall to redemption and to restoration. Another part could be about looking at what claims Jesus made and how he vindicated them. So that is a simplification of presuppositional apologetics. Like my last video, I did give a simple explanation of it, and I placed resources that specifically talk about that method in the description. However, the best strategy in presup is of course by just saying, by what standard?